And we're back in my basement gym on a Thursday, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Thursday morning. They were chilly and freezing and miserable because this entire winter has been SHIT, as my mom would say. But thanks for joining me here in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that emotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode, trying to modulate my voice because I have the microphone attached and I don't want to shout. Sometimes I can't help it. I get myself all worked up, especially because today I'm talking about a movie that I have not mentioned even in passing. I have not even mentioned this movie in passing, despite the fact that I am a big fan of both of its fantastic, legendary stars, and this will be the second time that I'm discussing one of these two stars within the last, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks. This will slot into somewhere in between the series of the great movies and the best movie you've never seen, because this film is now just about 35 years old. So it's unlikely that the youngins among you have seen it. I don't think it quite rises to the level of great movie, but it is a very interesting casting and just a really, really solid film about two damaged people who find one another. Cliche alert, but that's literally what this movie is. We're talking, of course, of Garry Marshall's 1991 film, Frankie and Johnny. The two great stars are Michelle Pfeiffer and Big Al himself, Al Pacino. Now, a couple of important kind of trivia pieces with regards to this movie, because I'm just going to forget, because I got so many thoughts colliding in my head. But here is a true piece of trivia. Michelle Pfeiffer starred in the late Jonathan Demme's 1988 kind of crime comedy Married to the Mob with an actor I love, Matthew Modine. And the working experience was very good, not only for her, but also for Demme. And we can make all kinds of jokes about how attractive Michelle Pfeiffer is. She is considered by many to be one of the most beautiful women who ever worked in cinema, and a very talented, resourceful actress. All this stuff is true. This is all real. But Jonathan Demme wanted to work with Michelle Pfeiffer. Again, they really did have a good working experience. When Jonathan Demme got hold of The Silence of the Lambs, and it was pretty assured that, okay, this is the guy the studio wants to direct the film. He did such a terrific job with Married to the Mob, Something Wild, another film which blends comedy with not even drama, comedy with some really negative and horrendous shit. Thanks to The Fire, another one who's gone, Ray Liotta. But Jonathan Demme, when he got the property and Ted Tally's screenplay, which is really one of the greatest book adaptations in history, no cap here. Talley took a 500-page novel, and I don't know how he turned it into a 120-page screenplay. I'm speaking from experience here, not at that level, but just having had to do book adaptations. It's not that easy. He turned that 500-page, very dense novel into a screenplay which maintained almost everything, easy for me to say, necessary from the book to make a great movie. So, Demme has a screenplay, and his choice to play Clarice Starling is Michelle Pfeiffer. Jodie Foster was busy doing her thing. She had started preliminary work on what became Little Man Tate. Very, very good movie, by the way. Really, really solid film. It might as well have been about her. It's about a child prodigy who has intellectual capacity that just doesn't make any fucking sense. As Jodie Foster, a child genius, a child prodigy who made good. Anyway, that's beside the point. Michelle Pfeiffer was offered Silence of the Lambs, and in the manner of Denzel 4 years later, when he's offered Seven, she turns it down for basically the same reason that Denzel, who expressed regret, boy, I wish I had done Seven. But he always says, I would have played the Brad Pitt part, not the Morgan Freeman part, and it might have been Al Pacino playing the Morgan Freeman part. We should all get the version of The Matrix where you have Denzel playing the Brad Pitt role and Al Pacino screaming his way through the Morgan Freeman part. You spoil that kid rotten! You think he got a great ass! Would have been beyond epic. But Michelle Pfeiffer turned down an opportunity to work with Demme again. She also had a great working script. She loved Jonathan Demme, but she thought the script was too irredeemably evil. It's almost word for word why Denzel turned down Seven. She turned down Silence of the Lambs. There we go. Here comes Jodie Foster. And in later years, similar to Denzel expressing the few regrets of his whole career, he regrets giving Michael Clayton to George Clooney. Damn, that would have been good. And he regrets passing on Seven. So Michelle Pfeiffer ended up not making Silence of the Lambs. And we got the Jodie Foster, and it won all of the major awards, the first movie since One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to sweep the Big Five, etc., etc. And Michelle Pfeiffer decided to make a more wholesome A plus B equals C kind of story about two damaged people who connect in Frankie and Johnny, directed by Garry Marshall, a TV guy, a screenwriter, a filmmaker, an actor, just a terrific, individual. He worked in Hollywood for so many years. It's hard to believe he's been gone 20 years. But Frankie and Johnny is a really good movie. And I give you a little backstory on Michelle Pfeiffer, more than I did in the film about two movie stars, the one that Michelle Pfeiffer made with Robert Redford, Up Close and Personal. But Al Pacino is such a gregarious, he's such a present personality, to use more current lingo. We didn't talk like that when I was growing up. I don't remember anybody in 1991 saying, yeah, you need to be present in your own life. What does that even mean? Okay. But Al Pacino, for somebody who is so vital and vibrant and active, even in his older era, still working his tail off. In the way of Harrison Ford, who you just get the feeling, some of these guys, they don't know what to do with themselves. When Harrison Ford, when he's asked, what would you like to do with the rest of your life? And when Harrison Ford immediately says, I'd like to stop working. No, you wouldn't. I don't believe you would. And I don't believe that Al would. But Al Pacino, after the mid-1980s failure of a Revolutionary War film where he plays a trapper, that's not a good job. Spoiler alert, that's not a good job. If you know what a trapper is, that really wouldn't fit in the current climate. Let's just put it that way. But he played a trapper who ends up aiding the Revolutionary War effort. That's fine. The movie is not good. Some interesting battle scenes, the way they stage it. The film is not good. And Big Al kind of disappeared. He says he was doing okay. He did some Broadway. He lived in the city. Little Italy, going out for dinner, whatever. He was, obviously, the guy already had money. But Al Pacino did not make a movie between Revolution and the fantastic suspense thriller Sea of Love, directed by Harold Becker. That's one of the best thrillers of the era, for sure. Kind of a whodunit, and you got great actors, Michael Rooker, John Goodman, another human cheat code, and a fire, Ellen Barkin. So Pacino's big comeback was Sea of Love, and he gives a little bit of a broader performance than we had seen in some films, in the 70s and 80s, but he's still not going ham, as they say, in a manner of the later films in the 90s. But then he did Godfather 3. It's not as good as the first two. Most people would agree. Good elements, Andy Garcia's great. Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. He's chewing it up a little bit in Godfather 3. But Pacino, there was something in the story of Frankie and Johnny that he responded to. And he really hadn't, for somebody who is considered, I could say considered, a very good-looking guy. Al Pacino is a very attractive person in a way that Michelle Pfeiffer is obviously a very attractive person. So you run the risk, when you have a film that's supposed to be a story of two ordinary people, I'm sorry, Robert Redford, but two normal-looking people who are both damaged, who are not supposed to look like movie stars, and we're supposed to believe that these are regular people. We're changing into regular people, as Stallone says. That's a little bit of a hill to climb. But I argue that they both do it. They both, Michelle Pfeiffer and Al Pacino, have such good chemistry in this film, they make us almost, not quite, we almost forget. These are not people who are unlovable. These are not people who are desperate for romance, if we're being honest. The characters of Frankie and Johnny are well crafted and beautifully acted by the two stars, who were both fully committed to the bit, as they said. So this film is about a short order cook who has just gotten sprung from a 18-month prison term for check forgery. It's a little Catch Me If You Can, only this guy is obviously, the character of Johnny, not nearly as clever as Frank William Abagnale Jr. was very, very clever and got away with a lot of his shenanigans, at least in the world of Catch Me If You Can. People still don't know just how much did he really get away with and how much of his story is bullshit. I don't know. There's certainly been a lot of speculation online, but we meet Frankie, the Michelle Pfeiffer character. She's a waitress in the kind of luncheonette that I did spend a lot of time in the early 90s, places like the Lantern, right around the Grand Hyatt Hotel. And there is a certain kind of place where you're not sure if it's a diner, if it's a luncheonette, or is it a coffee shop. What do you even refer to this place as? It's that kind of place. And it's run by a great character actor, Hector Elizondo. And Hector Elizondo is somebody who is so good in so many movies. He's an actor we take for granted just how authentic he was in these roles. And he plays a guy who runs this coffee shop. And he gives Al Pacino's Johnny a job. Now, there's actually, when you kind of think about it, another movie from 1991 featuring Pacino's buddy and future co-star De Niro. De Niro in Cape Fear plays a guy who at the beginning of the movie is sprung from prison. And he has this tranche, this crazy amount of books. And even the guys, the prison guards are like, well, Mr. Katie, would you like your books? And De Niro goes, already read them. Well, we get the idea that Al Pacino's character of Johnny is not a bad guy. He had a marriage that went wrong. He hasn't seen his kids, his ex-wife. He's not really in a good position as he gets out of prison and takes a job at this luncheonette. And immediately, this part's not a surprise. He sees Michelle Pfeiffer's Frankie, and she's not wearing any makeup, but she is gorgeous. But I don't think that we're supposed to believe he's responding to the fact that, wow, she looks like Michelle Pfeiffer. He's responding to the fact there is a certain energy that she is giving off that he connects to. Whether he would actually verbalize it and say, she seems a little bit broken, I'm into it, I don't know. But he is attracted to her immediately, and she spends a good amount of time pushing him away. Now, it's okay to push someone away if you're not into them, right? Spoiler alert, that's fine. But there is a way that Michelle Pfeiffer looks at him, relates to him, which suggests there is more going on than a woman who, hey, no offense, you're a good short order cook. You're clearly intelligent, but, oh, no thank you. I'm okay with us just working together, whatever the case might be. So as the story unfolds, we see that Frankie she's more damaged than she appears because she has a tough exterior and she seems to have it together. She doesn't lose her shit at work or anything like that. She's a good employee. She's respectful of others. But there's stuff going on with her. She probably has some sort of terrible trauma in her past. She maybe hasn't talked about it. She probably has not been to therapy. Again, you get ridiculous when you say stuff like that, but it's a real thing. This is somebody who probably should have been talking to somebody and should have been trying to synthesize the various feelings that she has. Now, there are certain elements of this film that are very quaint because it is contemporary for the time. This is a movie that was shot right around in history when Silence of the Lambs was coming out. It was probably shot in that range, late 1990, early 1991. So Michelle Pfeiffer, it's like a big thing in the movie. She gets a VCR. She gets a VCR. That was, the first VCR that we had at home in Massapequa. My dad bought it right when my sister was born. I don't need to tell you the year, but it was a big deal getting a VCR. So Frankie gets a VCR. And it looks like it's not going to pay off. How can you make jokes about a VCR? How can you mine humor from a VCR? Well, I'll tell you how. Let's say that Johnny asks Frankie out, and she very politely, no, thank you. No, thank you, pal. No, thank you. But he's persistent. He has a crush on her. He thinks that there is something between them. If I wanted a man, I wouldn't have bought a VCR. All right. If she wanted a man, she wouldn't have bought a VCR. That might be the biggest laugh in the movie. And then Nathan Lane as her friend, it's a cliche, the best friend. He's trying to set up the VCR. There's a lot of humor from that VCR. But another great actress who had been pretty big star, now she was doing these sorts of supporting roles, Kate Nelligan, plays another waitress in the restaurant, and she's hilarious. It's the kind of supporting role that in a different year gets an Oscar nomination, because she is absolutely a riot. She plays she's set up as the kind of floozy, to use another word that is not in common usage anymore. Johnny wants Frankie. Frankie doesn't seem to be interested in Johnny, so Johnny hooks up with this other waitress there. And sex scenes are not often played for laughs, at least they weren't back then. But the scene between Kate Nelligan and Al Pacino, they don't look right together at all. She looks like she could stuff him into a garbage can. Al is not like an enormous big guy, that's what she said, but she looks like she could beat the shit out of him, not even joking. So the sex scene is, and this, you start to get into the psychology of the characters a little bit, where they're doing it, or we're led to believe they're doing it, and Kate Nelligan, who seems to be enjoying it, almost like you hate to say it was a little bit of a sympathy thing because he was in prison for so long, but I feel like there's a little bit of that. So she asks him, did he complete on his end? Was it even any good? And he's like, oh yeah. But I didn't hear anything. He didn't make a sound. Well, when you're in a situation, you're in a time and you're in a place where there might be people listening, you learn not to make a sound. He says something like that. So the two characters slowly move towards one another. And Johnny's gentle nature, because he wasn't a violent offender. This is not Max Cady. This is not a dangerous guy. He might be a dangerous guy if he's out of money and is going to forge another check or do some other kind of credit card, maybe like a credit card scam to try to, drum up a little cash. But they start to move towards one another, and they begin what would have to be called a tentative romance. And the two of them really look good together. And they had good chemistry. I thought they had good chemistry. Al was, I guess he was 50 or 51 when this movie was shot. And I mentioned how Al Pacino, for a huge star, and you could say this about De Niro as well, didn't play that many conventional romantic leads. This, for somebody who was considered such an attractive guy, he didn't really play that many. De Niro played almost none. The closest you could say that De Niro came to playing a conventional romantic lead is in the movie Heat, the character with Amy Brenneman. But it's something that Al didn't do, and that was probably part of why he wanted to make this movie. And before I forget, again, there's just so much stuff that you could theoretically talk about with this. When the Broadway production went off, which it began in 1987, it was Kathy Bates who starred as Frankie. Kathy Bates, years before Misery, and this is one of the things that got her at least an audition for Misery, because that was another one that was, Bette Midler was offered sight unseen. She was offered the role of Annie Wilkes, and she turned it down for the same reason. She said, this is horrendous. I'm going to play a woman who cuts a guy's foot off? No, I'm all set here. You find somebody else. And then Bette Midler presumably regretted that in later years. When you've reached a level in the business where you're offered a role in a Stephen King adaptation or a Thomas Harris adaptation, I think you got to take it. But Kathy Bates originated the role of Frankie in the stage play. And the first actor is somebody who I know the name, but I'm not familiar with, his kind of acting style, Kenneth Welsh. And then F. Murray Abraham played the role of Johnny. Now, I gotta tell you, that's more believable, that these two people who look like regular people, they're damaged and they connect. Because neither F. Murray Abraham, brilliant actor, Oscar winner for Amadeus, nor Kathy Bates, they don't look like movie stars, and that was kind of the point. And there were some critics who mentioned, like, a weakness of the film is that we just can't believe that these people are that incapable, because they seem like they're interacting correctly. Neither one appears to be, downtrodden or overly depressed, or that they need to. But we go with it because the performers are so engaging, and the characters on the outer edges of the story are really colorful and interesting. And it never feels as if they're colorful and interesting just for the sake of trying to kind of spruce up the story. They took time where the other characters on the outer edges, we feel like they have an interior life. And I think this movie's about 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. I feel like it should be a little bit higher than that. The performances are so good, and there are a lot of big laughs. There is one bit, so Michelle Pfeiffer's character has this thing where she always knows how to open jars. She's figured out exactly what angle to hit a can, or what angle to hit it so that it's just going to open right up. Or sometimes she just has a really good grip and she can just, brutalize the can open. So that's one little quirky detail in this movie. And another one, there's a scene in the film where she goes to the counter and Johnny is on the other side and she's reading out an order. There's a ticket, but she's just reading the order so he can get started. And she gives this whole thing. We need corned beef hash, this one pancakes and egg, whatever it is, said, and she wants the eggs runny. Al Pacino recounts the order, and instead of saying runny, he says raw. And she goes, not raw, runny. 2 raw eggs! Al Pacino does not know, as Johnny, there is no difference between raw and runny. It's the same thing. Because if it's runny, it's raw. Now, they don't get into an argument there. He just lets her start shouting at him, and it almost looks like he's getting turned on because her eyes are starting to flash, and she's starting to really show some fire. But anyway, we don't really know exactly how this is going to turn out, and it's the sort of self-contained story where you're not supposed to get a comprehensive, happily ever after kind of ending. Because this movie is not shooting for the stars. It's keeping it in a lower key. And for this film, it's perfect. It's exactly what it needs. And I believed that despite still being quite stunning, I believe that Michelle Pfeiffer's character was happier, or thought that she was happier, by herself. And the Al Pacino thing that I always do, she don't need no man. I believe that Frankie thinks she doesn't need a man. If I needed a man, I wouldn't have bought a VCR. It's a laugh line, but she's not joking. That's how she sees things. She's okay in her little cocoon, and she's going to do the best she can, and she doesn't want to talk about any of the negative stuff that has happened to her in her younger days. Just because somebody lives a quiet life, it doesn't mean that they don't ponder the past or that they have not been traumatized, because she doesn't really seem like somebody who has been traumatized, but she is. And it's to Al Pacino's credit, the patience of his performance, that it's not, because it's in the script, but it's the way that he is very gentle in talking to her and trying to get her to open up to him. And yeah, there are moments where it feels like he just wants to get her clothes off, but he genuinely cares and wants more than just a roll in the hay. And there is something to be said that, again, watching this movie in my teens, all of that stuff I thought was all gobbledygook. Bro, you just want to get her clothes off. I understand that, but stop acting like you really care. You don't give a shit. Well, nah, he does. He does. Again, younger me was very dismissive because I, at that particular time, had no social life. And what we bring to the table seeing a film, especially like this for the first time, is going to inform how we see it. And my very cynical rendering at age 19 of, well, this is all bullshit, I don't blame him. But bro, give me a break. Stop acting like you're trying to make a connection here. You just want to get her clothes off. No. Now, there are some funny moments in the film where we see that she perhaps has been a little bit more active socially than we're led to believe, and some of Michelle's best work in the movie. And I'll just spoil this one part. So it looks like they're finally going to get to the finish line here. And she goes, "Have you got something?" And I'm sorry for this too. When she said, "Have you got something?" in my head, I heard R. Lee Ermey's Gunnery Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket. In my head, when she says, "Have you got something?" I heard R. Lee Ermey screaming, "Holy shit! I think you've got a hard-on!" When she says, "Have you got something?" she means, does he have protection? He jumps off of her and he lays there like this is the end of the world because I was right there and I don't got something, and are there even any stores open in this neighborhood at 1 a.m. or whatever time it is? But it turns out she's already prepared. My chest of drawers, there's a little box in the second drawer on the right side. Now that's funny. When I first saw it, then I'm screaming. I'm like, this is great. She was ready. Well, not the whole thing, but she was portraying that she wasn't interested in any of this stuff, and clearly she was and is. So this is not the kind of movie where you're going to spoil the ending, because it just isn't a film that has spoilable stuff. It's just really good story about two lonely, possibly broken people who meet and strike sparks. And given what Al would do later in the 90s with all of the performances of him screaming and yelling, I mean, his next film was Scent of a Woman, where he won his Oscar. That award should have been either Denzel or Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven. I'm sorry. I love Al, but it was a bit of a makeup Oscar because he could have won 4 or 5 already. There were people that wanted him to get supporting for Glengarry Glen Ross, but that wasn't going to happen in the year of Unforgiven, speaking of Clint, and Gene Hackman, who was very, very deserving of that award. But Frankie and Johnny is just, it doesn't seem like it could be a feel-good movie, but it is. It leaves us in a better state of mind and feeling better about life, I think, than when we started it. The actors tone down their natural charisma and really put on a good show, because there is a lot of this movie that it is just Michelle Pfeiffer doing her thing, Al Pacino doing his thing, or the two of them together seeing how far can they take this. Is this a real romance? Is this going to be an extended hookup? Is this just going to be a one-night stand? Like, they don't talk in that way. But Frankie is cautious. She certainly has more to be cautious about than Al Pacino's Johnny. So anyway, it's just what I wanted to talk about, because this is a film that I've always been a fan of, and I love the two principals. They're both great, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Didn't do an episode yesterday or the day before, but I wanted to kind of get back to it with a movie that I am a fan of, and yeah, I'll spare you the exaggerated wrap-up. I hope you all have a great Thursday. Today is March 19th. Bruce Willis's 71st birthday. I mean, best wishes to Bruce, a legend in his own right, and somebody that I'm also an enormous fan of. But I did a birthday episode on him last year, and I think I might have even done one the year before, so don't want to just keep regurgitating very similar material. So take care and have a great Thursday. Peace.